Well, welcome back to the summit. I am your host, Dr. Lisa Olszewski. I am so glad that you are here and you are in for a treat in this next little half hour summit special. We have the founder of, or co-founder of Keto Mojo. His name is Dorian, and that's all I'm going to say, because if I go to say his last name, I'll probably slaughter it because he just told me how to say it. So you say how it should be said.
It's kind of easy just to say Mr. Mojo.
Okay.
Mr. Mojo is a good way to do it. Yeah, thank you for that lovely introduction.
Sounds great. So you have a great story as to how basically this all came about. So share with us, share with us a little bit of your information, because it's going to be an inspiration to a lot of other people that might be sitting here saying, boy, I need to start a journey, but it's so many steps down the road that I can't even envision ever getting there, going through. If you're struggling with weight loss, etc., he's got a fabulous story.
Yeah, I mean, back in 2015, I was 210 pounds. And for me, that was quite heavy. I'd never, as a young man, had any issues with my weight. But, as I got older and I got into my 40s, my weight kind of popped up. I'd lost my joie de vivre, and I had all the biomarkers for metabolic syndrome. I was on antidepressants, and I was doing terrible at my job, and it just wasn't working. And then a good friend of mine, Todd White of Dry Farm Wines, in his southern drawl, said, "You got to give up those white devils, cast them out." And I'm like going, "Hey, dude, I don't do fad diets. I'm like more of a scientific sort of like person." So I read everything that I could on paleo and on keto and Volek and Finney and all the greats like Taubes and Lustig, and the evidence was so very, very clear to me. And so I started off paleo, but I was doing fruit leathers and things like that. It's paleo, and lots of baked goods using almond flour. And it just wasn't working. And then when I went keto and was testing to a meter, that's when the superpowers, that's when the magic happened. And my weight just dropped off, and I lost 47 pounds and came off of all antidepressants. And my biomarkers were incredible. And it was in that moment, that, I was testing with a competitor's meter, and I was like, why is this strip $4? It shouldn't be $4. So I set about looking at different manufacturers, and the goal was to test 3 times a day for less than the cost of a latte, and to have affordable testing, because it was a game changer for me, because you can only manage what you measure. And
I love that.
Measurement is the first step that leads to control.
Mm-hmm.
And once you can control something, you can improve upon it. And that's where the game happens.
So let's go through how to measure ketones, because there are 3 different ways that people will hear about throughout the summit, but really the most accurate is through blood. But we can talk about, using the urine strip, right? People, a lot of times new to keto people will use the urine strip, and then they find out at some point, they're like, wait a minute, I'm not in ketosis anymore. That's what they think, right? But we really want to test the beta hydroxybutyrate in the blood.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, when people say they think, oh, test your ketones, we don't realize there's 3 types of ketones. They're not created equal. I kind of think of them like a backing group of singers. In the middle, you've got the big bass, the beta hydroxybutyrate, and that represents about 70% of the energy that's in the body. Then you have acetoacetate that represents about 28% of the energy in the body, but that's very volatile, and it moves quickly between acetoacetate and beta hydroxybutyrate. That's what you measure in your urine. And then finally you have acetone, which comes off in the breath, and is only roughly 2%. And then all 3 of them are used in different metabolic pathways. The challenge with urine, and they work for just when you're first starting, in the first couple of weeks there, you might spill it into your urine as your body, your mitochondria hasn't adjusted and changed to be able to utilize that. And then eventually they don't show up. And urine is an amalgamation of what occurred over the last few hours, and doesn't say what's going on with you in that moment. Acetone is a byproduct. It's like measuring the exhaust on your car. And measuring the exhaust in your car can certainly give you maybe how dirty or clean your engine is, but is it actually going to tell you how much you've got in the tank, how efficient you are at utilizing or producing ketones, or whether or not you actually have a sensitivity to a particular item like a sugar, alcohol, or something like that. And so the gold standard of testing is blood. It's what all of the clinical trials are done on. It's all of the studies are done on. And this is how you can work out your bio-individuality and to be able to tailor your dietary choices to your body, which is far more important, because I didn't like living my life to the lowest common denominator. Like, is it the 20-gram carb rule of Dr. Westman? 20 grams total, 20 grams net? What if you're an athlete? Could you have 55 grams, 60, 70, 100 grams? This is the question, is you could kind of like work out what your carb edge is. And blood is the tool that will help you there. And blood also helps you in the way of, I think in a psychological way, especially when you're first starting, where you're going like, am I in ketosis? Am I not in ketosis? Will this carrot kick me out of ketosis? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have the keto police will certainly come along and tell you about every single food. Spend some time on social media. Someone's going to blow that whistle at you. And so yeah. So that's why, test, don't guess, as doctors like to say.
Oh, for sure. And so let's talk about that, because bio-individuality is really, it's a huge term right now. And what works for me in keto might not work for you, and vice versa. And so it is something that I think every single person really needs to hone in on, because there's a lot of, we were talking about this even pre-interview, there's a lot of people that I see in my practice that are like, well, this doesn't work, or whatever it is. And then when you start to deep dive in, there's certain foods that they're eating.
Yep.
That are triggering them, like just totally knocking them out of ketosis. And that's probably why they're not really having the success that they wanted to see.
Right. So what I look at testing of blood ketones a little bit as the training wheels in life. They're training wheels for you to learn your body. And so let's take a look at this and what we mean by bio-individuality. There was a famous Israeli study, about 8,400 people were in the study through 46,000 meals. They tested them at their baseline, and they tested somebody's results to a banana, or somebody's results to a cookie, and everybody had a different response. And what I mean by that, it's your insulin response. Some people are more insulin resistant, and you can have one sniff at a cupcake, and they're going to be putting on 10 pounds. And then there'll be other people who can power that down, and they look absolutely fantastic. They're the tofis, they're thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So it's your body. So what I like to do is first of all work out a baseline, and that's know what I am normally in the morning about an hour after waking, because you have a dawn effect where you have a cortisol spike that gets you ready, that pushes up your blood glucose. Mm-hmm. So that kind of gives me, and I will do my glucose and my ketones at the same time in the morning, same droplet, and it takes less than 15 seconds to get that done. Now I know me, and I normally wake up and I'm elevated in about the 1995 milligrams per deciliter. I'm going to do this in the American vernacular. And for me, that's my normal. And then it blows off about after an hour and a half, 2 hours, it gets down into about 83 for me. But I've been following a well-regulated ketogenic diet since 2015. I mean, 83, 85, somewhere like that. And I don't really sweat any movement in the 80s or into the 90s to me, because you'll start getting into what I would call statistical margins of error for the accuracy nature of what a blood meter can do. I've had people say, I tested at 92, and then I tested again and I was at 87, and I tested again and I was 85. And I'm like, it's like archery. Those are all fantastic readings. You are in the zone and your zone. So that's the first thing, is your baseline. Then I'll try and
Sorry, but there's a huge, they can have a huge variable, right? Like the FDA says it's okay, right? For a certain amount.
Yeah.
Because I caught that on one of mine, and that's how I figured things out.
so here it is. It's like, think of it like archery. Like an archer can have a quiver of 20 arrows, and the first time he gets in the bullseye, second time in the bullseye, third time not in the bullseye, fourth time not quite in the bullseye, fifth time could actually leave and miss the area. So that's basically how it is. And when you do your clinical trials, you have to do N equals 200 in low, medium, and high ketones. So that's why we talk about understanding your baseline, your zone. You can be as much as 20% out with the FDA. And so 100% of the time we'll meet FDA standards. Roughly 98% of the time we will meet the more stringent ISO European standards of being within 15%. Somewhere I think it is around about 90%, 88, 90% of the time, we will be within 10%, and sort of like maybe I think it's about 60% of the time we're going to be within 5%. So that's what it is. It's that archery game. And so that's why little variations, don't sweat them, know where your zone is. But then what you're looking for is these bigger spikes. So I would have a meal, say for instance, a new type of breakfast, maybe it's a keto granola, and I would wait about an hour after eating that and I would test again. I don't want to see a spike of more than 30 milligrams per deciliter in my glucose when I'm measuring my glucose measure, because I mean, that's had too high carbs or I had a response to that. The other thing I look for is where I'm doing with my baseline of ketones. Generally, my ketones are lowest in the morning. And for me, they generally go up during the day. And so they're at their highest for their evening meal. If I see my ketones come down after a meal, and I didn't see my glucose go up, that could infer to me that I might have had an insulin response to something that it was in there that didn't give me a glycemic response, a glucose response, which means, is there something there that is a sensitivity to me, like a sugar alcohol? For me, that's a classic. Sugar alcohols will cause my ketones to drift down a little bit. Too much protein for me can also cause my ketones to come down. Now, there are some carnivores out there like Danny Vega. You know, like that guy could eat an entire cow and still be in a state of ketosis, and he's ripped as well. So great to him, but that's his bio-individuality. So when I see in social media going like, no, carnivore, too much protein will not kick you out of ketosis. You're like, well, your reason for doing your journey is going to be different. Danny Vega, he's looking to build up bulk, get muscle, and get swollen that way there. That's going to be different to somebody who's got epilepsy, or somebody who is insulin resistant, or type 2 diabetes, or even for cancer. And so you have to really understand the journey of that individual as you move forward. So coming back to the testing is, you're looking to see what happens with you, and then you adjust your diet so that you don't get the undesired outcome. So you want to have the desired outcome. And then as you keep adjusting, sorry, I've got a little dog coming to join me, that's his nose there. So as you adjust your diet to you, the need to testing is less. And this is the way the cool bit comes. We are the training wheels. You test a lot to begin with, but as you start to learn your body, the need to test, because we are creatures of habits. My dinners become the same. You know, I'd like to go out for my Indian meal. I've been for them many times. I know what I can eat at an Indian restaurant. I'm never out of ketosis. Gemma and I test for wine these days, and that makes the kind of like difference.
All right. So what are some of the other triggers that are common foods that you see with people that will throw them out? Like
dairy and casein is one of the big ones that I see. This is very prevalent in the multiple sclerosis road, but I think they focus on it a lot more with the Dr. Walls and the Walls protocol. So some people like to do an elimination diet. So I think dairy is definitely a key one that comes on into play there. And so now, but not all dairies are created equal.
Right.
Ghee is not the same as a goat cheese or as a sheep cheese, or as the same as a full fat milk versus heavy cream. So when we lump dairy, we have to find out a little bit more like that. I make my own ghees. I'm absolutely fine with that. I'm totally fine with heavy creams. And I'm okay with cheese. That's me. I'm lucky in that result. Sugar alcohols, big problem for me. Xylitol, mannitol, sorbitol, all of those will take their tolls. I do get an insulin response from those. They might not spike my glucose, but they do bring my ketones down. And I definitely try to avoid them when I'm fasting. And right now I'm at 66 hours fasted, I think.
Awesome.
Let me just check. I got my life app going on this bit on the here to see where we are, where all the whole team are fasting right now, and we're donating $2 for every hour fasted to the team for brain cancer.
Oh wow.
Brain tumors. Yeah, 68 hours fasted so far.
That's amazing. What is your goal for that? What are you guys looking toward?
Well, we're going for 115, going to go for
Okay.
that big long 5-day
Yeah.
extended metabolic reset, but it takes time to build your fasting chops up to that.
Yes.
I've been keto since 2015. um, you know some fasting is right for some people, it's not for others, but
Yeah.
I started at just like the 16 hours, and then the 18 hours, and the 20s, 24s,
Mm-hmm.
36s, allowing time in between. And for me, it's, I want to come out of COVID without the COVID bod.
Right. Isn't that where everybody, yes. Right. So how often are you testing? Let's just go down, like talk about this with fasting right now. How long do you test or how often are you testing your ketones during, like during the day with fasting? Is it just out of, I mean,
Fasting, I really is when I do a lot more testing, because
right.
there is a psychological response and there is a physiological
Yeah.
response. The first thing I love to see on a physiological response is seeing my GKI descend, and it's very dramatic on the graph, as you can see it.
Yeah.
You quickly see your glucose from being in the 90s starts dropping down underneath under the 80s. When I last tested, I was about 69.
Wow.
So my glucose has come down on nicely. To begin with, when I'm first testing, I see the glycogen getting dumped. And so I see a big variability. So
Yeah.
I might in the morning have 95, 96, but then I might be down by the mid to end of the day in those 70s. So I've seen quite a big glucose, but then when you look at the average trends on down, and then it just settles itself out. At the same time, I'm seeing my ketones go up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm normally between 1.1, 1.7 personally for me, but right now, as this morning, I'm at about 3.2s,
Yeah.
3.5s. So I've got a really nice GKI of 1.1. And then when I get this little twinge of a hunger pang, or think, oh, like earlier on today, I was like, I thought of toast. I haven't thought of toast in ages.
It
And I'm
is so
like,
psychological, right?
it was right there. And I'm like going, I could almost smell it. It was really strange. And then I was like, okay, so I just did a test. And then I saw my ketones was at 3.5. Well, that's telling me I've got huge amounts of energy in my body. If I'm normally between 1.1 and 1.7, and now I've got 3.5, I've got plenty of fuel. I'm not hungry. That's what tells me what the psychological issue that is going on with that.
I know.
And so I enjoy that journey and using testing to develop where I am. If I find myself getting too jittery, I sort of like what's going on at that moment. And
Mhm.
usually it's a glass of water. Electrolytes is key for me.
Yes.
Very, very key. If it's so easy on fasting not to add electrolytes, not to add that salt into your water, then you get more headaches that will come on in. But fasting it takes
Yeah.
time.
Oh,
It is,
absolutely. To allow your body to adapt to it. But
and
I
those
do. I
people who
love
go
it. Like I'm
hardcore,
hacking the whole time trying to like checking my blood and I'm like, okay, what am I doing now? It's
and
like
so
geeky brain.
when you're testing a lot, that's when it's important to rotate through your fingers
You're
and use the side of the finger up here, closer to where the fingernail cuticle is in this area. When I see people testing on the tip just there,
oh,
that's the most sensitive. So I
yeah.
rotate through every single finger. I use both
Yeah.
hands,
Yeah.
and it's fine. But yeah.
So you touched on GKI. Let's deep dive into that to explain to them what that is and
So kudos to Professor Thomas Seyfried, who first put forth the GKI, the glucose ketone index. And it's the relationship between your glucose measurement, and generally taken in the European metric style in millimoles, divided by your ketone measurement, obviously in millimoles. To do that in the American way, you take your milligram per deciliter measurement divided by 18 to give you your millimoles. So a GKI over 9, generally you're not in GKI ketosis. There are edge cases where you can have a high glucose and then 0.6 of ketones, and that'll say, hey, you're not in GKI ketosis. But generally a GKI over 9, it's not where you need to be. I remember this was originally put forth for cancer patients, as cancer being a metabolic disease. So it's all about reducing the glucose within the body as much as possible, accentuating the ketones for the anti-inflammatory effects that you can get from that. So for a therapeutic zone, you want to be sort of like under 3 is definitely into the therapeutic area. Like the holy grail is 1 and below, but that's super hard to do. And it's usually, I would recommend for people, if like you're novices, don't go shooting for one here. Don't go chasing ketones. That's not the way.
Right.
If to get into the ones, you're going to be in severe caloric restriction, 800 calories or less per day, or you have to be on an extended fast. And if you're not used to the extended fast, it's sort of like, build up to that.
Yeah.
But people are doing that for specific reasons, either
Mm-hmm.
definitely for a cancer diagnosis, maybe a little bit for epilepsy, or people like me going like, I want to do a metabolic reset. I'm looking at for the autophagy that you get from having a low GKI. I'm looking for that that human growth hormone increase to come on in from an extended fast, but I'm specifically targeting that. So GKI is the relationship between glucose and ketones, because if you aren't measuring both sides, you're only seeing half the true picture that is coming in.
Oh, I love it. So where can I find some information about you? And I know you guys have a great GKI meter, or I guess it would be called meter, like measuring tool on your website.
Yeah, we actually have, we've got meters available throughout the whole of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We have meters obviously in America, but we also have a calculator on our website. But if you have our new meter and you download our app, it will now automatically, I don't know if you can see my GKI there. I just brought that in for you guys. You can see it dropping down underneath
Cool.
there into the ones. What it will do is it will, if you measure within 4 minutes of each other, your glucose and your ketones, and you download that to your app, it will automatically track your GKI for you over time. But we have a huge amount of information on the website, ketomojo.com, ketone basics, testing basics. We've got videos series that is on there. I've got over 140 hours of videos if you want to listen to all the greats and recipes and how-tos and all of that jazz.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was so informative. And so now people know exactly how to test those ketones and whether or not, I just love the fact that we can actually see reliable results.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.